Okay, let's just let it run.
I find myself.
The main thing is this will record the conversation, so that if later on we want to remember what was said, then we can get it off the soundtrack.
Are we rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank y'all for coming out. Really appreciate it. Barnes & Noble has very generously set this up for us, and so I'd kind of like to return the favor. I encourage y'all to patronize the cafe if you haven't already. I, of course, want to have a robust and enthusiastic discussion, but we are kind of in the middle of the bookstore, so let's try to moderate the volume as much as possible. And finally, I want to make this a regular thing, monthly or maybe bi-monthly. So when we're done, I would very much appreciate suggestions for the next book. Yes, sir.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Liam. I'm somewhat new to FACT. I've only been involved for about 3 or 4 months. I am a recovering theist. I'm Jewish. I was very much a Jewish theist as a child. I've had a slow journey toward soft atheism. I call myself an agnostic atheist. I've been an agnostic I've moved from very pro-Jewish to I took comparative religion courses in college, and that made me think, well, every religion must be right and every religion must be wrong. And then I got to thinking, well, how do we know? And then I read this book and I said, well, there's probabilities as to we have a pretty good idea. So yeah, I'd like to know what we should do next. So if you have any suggestions for the next book at the end, please feel free. I've prepared about a half a dozen topics. We don't have to stick to them, obviously, but I'm hoping they'll be good jumping off points. So let's start with what we were just talking about, which is Dawkins several times points out that criticism of religious beliefs is somehow, quote, offensive and, quote, off limits. Why is this the case? What is the quote, unquote, reasoning behind this?
Now everybody go quiet.
Have I stumped everybody?
I don't know, but it is. I mean, it doesn't sound logical, but it is. I have relatives in Ohio, for example, and I'm advised when I talk to them is not to get onto these subjects. And I've had people that once we engage in a conversation like this, and I begin to press a point, they'll say something like, "Oh, let's don't talk about that. I don't want to discuss that." And they just somehow or the other, I think they really are not sincere in their beliefs. I mean, they're not sure of their beliefs. And so when you start to challenge them, they realize that their belief is being challenged, and they don't want that. They really want to hold on to it.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think you're right about their uncertainty, their dubiousness where faith is concerned. But I'd also say that even if you're making some observation or objection or good question about somebody else's religion, for somebody who's a believer of some sort, that believer very often feels that he can't abide any other religion being questioned, even though those differences used to be the basis for all kinds of mayhem for centuries and centuries. Because any question you raise about that religion, he'll naturally raise about his own. And so any criticism of any religion is a criticism of them all. And that's probably one of the reasons that believers don't want to talk about this at all.
Well, another thing is, it's very much like politics. A lot of people adopt a position, and as he points out in here, for us, and for me, people apart my age, we grew up in the church and everything. I remember coming home as a young kid. What did you learn in Sunday school today? We sang this song. What was the song? I don't know, but it had the word Sino in it. Jesus loves me, the Sino. So anyway, I was indoctrinated, right? I didn't have a brain, I couldn't think. So you get this position, and even if it's not necessarily that old, you're going to resist any information that makes you change that position. I I grew up as a Democrat. Okay, well, I'm not going to hear anything that says that's not a good thing. I grew up as a Christian. Anything that you challenge me on, I don't really want to even go there. Anything that shakes my position, why would I do that? You want me to have another position? You want me to take the position of being an atheist? Oh my God, we're all going to hell if we do that. We know that's bad.
Yeah.
So that's it. Just the resistance to change and
Yeah. Well, but as I was saying to him when we were talking earlier, other forms of irrational thought were encouraged to challenge. For example, if you believe that radio waves are being beamed into your head or that thoughts are leaking out of your head, you're free to say that this is schizophrenia. This is not right. You need to challenge this. But when it comes to religious beliefs, that's off limits. That's
Right.
politically incorrect. It's disrespectful. That doesn't seem fair.
Well, conversely, you hear a lot of conservative, socially conservatives, politically conservative people who talk out against political correctness. And what they mean by that is people challenging religion, which kind of seems contradictory.
Well, they want to feel free to challenge other religions than their own. But when their religions are challenged, we're being oppressed.
Right.
It's like Monty Python, help, help, I'm being oppressed.
I'm conservative and I'm an atheist. And I hate it when anybody, I don't care if it's my guy or not, just brings up the God card. So, just,
Like Trump was sent to us by God. I mean,
I
I
never
think
heard that being said, but I've heard politicians on all sides of the fence
Or
playing
I-
the God card.
I have the right to be bigoted against LGBT people or against gay marriage because God.
Yeah, it's against my religion.
Right. Which is nonsense.
my,
I mean, we used to justify slavery by playing the God card and, racism by playing the God card. That's now gone by the wayside, but
my niece in Ohio, who's a Facebook friend, was asserting that really homosexuality is a sin because it's in the Bible. And I pointed out to her, your tattoo is mentioned in the
Yes,
Bible
true.
also.
right.
And then my other one, who is a
Your level
retired,
pulled pork.
who is retired Air Force colonel, chimed
pierced
in and
ears.
said,
Your
it's
pierced
a
ears.
matter of context. So that was the excuse. Homosexuality is a sin, but your tattoo is not. Even though they're both explicitly called a sin, it is a matter of context that makes one, it makes it okay to be against homosexuals, but all right to have a tattoo.
Well, the excuse for that is, the New Testament changed everything, but, please, you cherry pick.
But the fact is that the New Testament doesn't mention homosexuality, I think.
Well, not in the Gospels.
Right.
Yeah,
Does approve slavery.
Doesn't
that's
prove
right.
slavery.
That's right.
I was thinking about the Ten Commandments, and I was thinking, wouldn't it have been a good thing if they'd maybe gotten one of the self-protecting God amendments, commandments, and replaced it with something like, "Don't crap uphill from the well,"
Right.
or "Slavery is an abomination." I mean, those are, or maybe consider the possibility of examining yourself biologically.
And don't drive slowly in the fast lane.
Those were useful.
Yeah, I can't find it offhand, but Dawkins does cover a couple lists of atheist Ten Commandments, which are much more of a humanist basis and covers things like, I can't think of it offhand, but areas
How we
that
treat
should have,
one another.
right,
Yeah.
areas that should have been covered by the Ten Commandments but weren't. And, replaces the whole nonsense of, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not make graven images. Why is God so jealous? Why is an all-powerful being so threatened?
A good thing about a Kindle edition is you can search.
Oh, can you find?
Well, let's see. Well, he mentions that the first four commandments Or really nothing, nothing at all. Let's see.
Well, I kind of notice with
If I can find this.
some of Dawkins's lectures that I've seen on YouTube and such, he does have kind of a tendency to not bite the hand that feeds him, so to speak, as far as the publishing companies go and such. And being in a culture, a Judeo-Christian culture, and I mean, to be totally free from Abrahamic influences and traditions is almost impossible. And so do you kind of go along with it, I mean, as best you can, or do you just completely divorce yourself from it? And I think he kind of, yeah, of course he favors one wing of it, you know, and I believe, and I think that's a good thing? For the time being, I have to say yes.
Well, Dawkins encourages biblical literacy in the sense of you need the cultural references in order
Yes.
to understand modern literature.
I mean, ideally, people would be free of the Abrahamic superstitions, and you know, we would have a legal system that's not based off of those superstitions. But in the meantime, we're stuck with those superstitions. You know.
Yeah. Anyway, page 263 is the alternative Ten Commandments. And it has things like, in all things strive to cause no harm, live life with a sense of joy and wonder, test all things, always check your ideas against the facts, and be ready to discard even a cherished belief if it does not conform to them.
Exactly. That should be number one.
Form independent opinions on the basis of your own reason and experience. Do not allow yourself to be led blindly by others. Do not discriminate or oppress on the basis of sex, race, or as far as possible, species. Oh, here's a good one. Do not indoctrinate your children. Teach them how to think for themselves, how to evaluate evidence, and how to disagree with you.
Right.
If I could bring up something on that point, I agree for all parents. I'm saying, being a free thinker, I don't impose it on my children.
Right.
I mean, have them come along, but if they want to explore, you know, I mean, they were raised, they went through the first 3 sacraments of the Catholic Church because I was Catholic when I got married, and that was my vow. But I also think if I remove all religion from them and any form of education, I think it's going to backfire on me as far as they might be devout in some area that, you know, I wouldn't be able to, I guess, understand or, yeah, maybe even influence a little bit. So I realize that I feel for all groups. So when I see some people, even in our community, like the kids, you know, wearing the shirts and doing it, and they're in the forefront, and I just feel like that child has not made that choice for themselves yet. Right. And I feel, you know, they can. Right. My daughters, they help me a lot for for credit and for education. You know, so
Calling someone a Methodist child is not much more offensive than calling a child an atheist child.
Yes, and
That's how I feel.
Dawkins makes that point, is that I don't think he uses the phrase child abuse, but he says it is tantamount to child abuse to impose a religious label on a child when they are far too young to accept a belief system for themselves.
Can we also say a non-religious label?
Until they
Or non-religious, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, he talks about the Brights, which is a atheist group which adopted a euphemism, and one of their tenets is children below the age of being able to reason and think for themselves are not allowed to join the religious organization until they can think for
Here's the
reason for
test.
themselves.
Define the sino. And you can
That's funny.
So my daughter is the one that turned me on to this book, and the other book he's got. There's only 2 books that I've read of his, and they're both the only books I've read more than once.
Yeah.
But then I go to have a discussion with my brother, who's 7 years younger than me. He tells me I'm going to hell.
Oh yeah.
Simply for reading the book.
He can't. No, I can't discuss anything with him that has to do with. Let's just throw this idea out. Oh no, blah blah blah.
Right. Well, I mean, I think Dawkins even says people say that you would go to hell just for reading this book because it's dangerous.
Well, yeah,
It encourages free thought.
That's a catch-all.
You know, the funny thing is, I could probably bring Yellow Pages in here, go through a church directory, and just start with the Adventists and go all the way down, and compare the creeds that each one of them have, and then oppose them to the other ones, the Adventists versus the Baptists and Catholics and Pentecostals, and each one of them telling each one else that they're going to hell and they're going to burn in hell. So make your choice now. play Russian roulette with 1,000 bullets in the barrel,
Yeah.
or don't believe in any of it at all.
Yeah, even though the overlap amongst all of them is probably greater than the differences,
Right,
but
yeah.
you know there have been atrocities committed in the name of
Wars
does
have been fought.
does the magic cracker literally turn into the body of
Yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
or just figuratively?
Crawl up on that pile of wood if you don't agree with me.
Right.
And then you got, at the very end, you got the synagogues away from, in the corner, running away from all of that. They've got all theirs, and they're like, okay, we're separated from you guys. We're not under that influence, but we've got our own. So it's like, and then now you got the little inclusion of the Islamic, groups. So it's like, okay, there you go. You got to.
And like he's pointing out in the first few pages, I was going to read it 3 times, but I only got about 50 pages into it. And he just says, look, all these discussions of this crap, it's just somebody imagined it. Or they came up with this construct in order to have power over people.
Yes.
And so really all this discussion of what might have happened with these guys, transubstantiation, blah, 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 this, that, it. We're still fighting and killing each other over it. So some religions believe in that more than others to this day. But it's so absurd. It's like,
Well, you said, and I'm sorry, I'm Letty, and I forgot your name.
I'm John.
John. Power over the people. And I know for my parents, raising us Catholic, and it was, I wouldn't dare have a bad thought, because I have to confess that to a priest. I would not, grew up knowing that I could get away with a lot, but he would always know. So I know for my parents, it was easy to raise 6 children if you put that in their heads. And,
Pack your bags, you're going on a
none
guilt
of
trip.
us had, young pregnancies.
Jesus died
all my
on the cross
siblings.
for your sins.
We all waited till we were 30 till we got married. None of us had it. So I guess if I could if I could do the same thing with my children, where I could know that they were going to do what I thought would make my life a little easier by not getting in trouble or breaking any rules because they think they're all sins. But you grow up with a lot of issues and all the perfectly natural things
Right.
that normal people think and feel is a sin.
Right.
So that's, kind of what my
See,
parents, and we never talked about such things. So
this-
control over people and
Yeah,
especially
and the
children.
thing about the sin, if this is what makes people become liars.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Of course.
if I'm not sinning, I'm going to have to lie.
Which
I
you're
like-
going to confess.
I like this point about power. I did not discover this until I was in my mid-20s, but I had an uncle, my dad's oldest brother, turned out to be thinking very much like I had for a decade, I suppose. We were in a conversation one day, and I said, well, what do you do when they come knocking on your door on Saturday morning to try to inform you of the truth?
Come without your shorts.
And so- well, I had another friend who showed up with nothing on and said, come on in. And they didn't bother him again. He was able to sleep in every Saturday morning. But my uncle said, I just look him in the eye and say, look, you can't all be right. As you say, you go down the list and there's always differences and exceptions. You can't all be right. But it's entirely possible that you can all be wrong. So I want you to just leave me alone and I'll find my own way to hell. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I apologize. Let me stop things here. I completely forgot to go around and have everybody introduce each other. So let's do that real quick. I already covered let's say your name, where you're from originally, and the belief system you were raised in as a kid. So we did me. I'm Liam. I'm from Chicago originally, and I was raised Jewish.
John Narciso, I was born in Austin, went to California for a while, back here for a while. Raised Christian, ended up as a Presbyterian through high school and what have you.
I'm Sean, a military brat, former fundamentalist, independent Baptist, only people going to heaven at one time, one place, and became a freethinker many, many years ago, and still am pursuing it.
I'm Letty, raised Catholic from San Antonio, generations and generations. After I was married, and my I guess, my children after they were born, and I started to pursue other, I guess, beliefs. Actually, the Jehovah's Witnesses affected me first, because a lot that they said was like, yeah, I can go along with that, and that's kind of opened that door where I started to look into how they're all messed up. So my parents do not know, and I have 3 children. Well, actually 4. Consider my 26-year-old stepdaughter, and this is my youngest, Joseph. So Joseph, your turn. Just say your name, a little bit about yourself.
My name is Joseph. I was born in Wisconsin.
In your grade, maybe?
Fourth grade.
And your mom thinks enough of you to bring you along. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm Steven. I'm from here, San Antonio. I was raised Southern Baptist, and maybe 1984, maybe I started becoming an agnostic, and then around 92, I would consider myself an atheist.
I'm John Blanton. I was born in Toller, Texas, which is about 200 people. And my family went to a Methodist church. We moved to the county seat, Granbury, where I grew up. And we attended that church until one day the preacher got up and told my father how evil labor unions were. Since all our family came from union wages, that was the last time my father attended the church. So that's about the story of that.
I don't know how evil what were?
Labor unions.
Labor.
My goodness.
Was there a biblical support for that?
Wow!
Thou shalt not strike.
My name's Robert Bly. I've been a San Antonian for 3 years now. Spent the first 70 years of my life in Nebraska. I was the oldest child in a family of 2 farm kids. My mom and my dad were young kids in a big farm family. My dad became a Methodist because my mom agreed to marry him. And they raised us kids in the Methodist church, and about, as near as I can tell, looking back on it, about 11, it just all seemed so much like the Santa Claus story that I couldn't buy any of it. It just seemed silly. Why would you do this to me, Mom and Dad? You taught me how to read. You taught me how to cipher. You taught me how to count, recite the alphabet. But you want me to spout this nonsense. And they never put me into any particular trouble for it. I think they were disappointed, but I think they also thought, well,
Maybe he's right.
we're perhaps. You guys, particularly when you mentioned about the control aspect, I hope I can get this right. Somewhere it is written that foolish people found the religious doctrine true. Wise people found it false. And rulers found it useful. And I'm thinking that there's probably a lot in every one of these traditions, it was somebody trying to figure out how to stay in control of this situation.
Sure. Well, let's switch gears a little. Let's talk about agnosticism a little, which is a topic near and dear to my heart because I've only recently made the transition from agnosticism to soft atheism. So, do you agree with Dawkins that agnosticism is essentially a cop-out, that it is a way to doubt the existence of a higher power but live in denial of the evidence and arguments against the existence of a god or gods?
Kind of like being an independent in
Right.
political scene.
Right.
It kind of sounds like a quiz question on this course that I'm taking up at the university. Our professor there is a member, in fact, it's Oakdenberg, and he's teaching this course on the philosophy of atheism. And this is one of the things. What defines an agnostic as opposed to a theist or an atheist? And so they make a big deal of that. There are some references that I can give out. Have copies of the books here if anyone wants them. I'll mail them out.
I think saying you're an agnostic, you suffer less social consequences. You're not. People are saying, "Oh, maybe there's."
People don't know what that is.
Right. I'll give you an example. After I left the fundamentalist back in the early 80s. I moved down here, and Madalyn Murray O'Hair at the time was up there in Austin, so I was starving for any sort of literature that organization might have had. So I drove up there, got under a compound, and it was a compound. I had Constantine wire around the front and everything. So, so I'm intimidated because I didn't have a lot going on in my head that I could have ran back to the church probably at any second. So for me to be face to face with this lady, I was pretty intimidated by it. But I was there, and I didn't even know if she was there or not. But I was there, and a gentleman at the front desk said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm looking for some literature, blah blah blah." And they had a library in the back there, but I guess it was closed. They had some sort of rain damage, and all of a sudden I saw her son, Madalyn Murray, her son and daughter, there, and then I heard her voice, and it was really rough and barking. She's barking orders at everyone back there, and she goes, "Who's that up there?" And the guy turns around and tells her when I'm a former fundamentalist Baptist, want to get literature. And she came up to me. She was the kindest, nicest lady you ever met in my life. She gave me a cook's tour of the library, and she was telling me about people. I told her what I had read, Ingersoll and Bertrand Russell, and she goes, well, she was steering me towards some of her literature and such. And I said, I've been reading some Isaac Asimov, and she goes, well, Isaac Asimov, he's a buddy of mine, and she said, but he's on the fence. He should just come out and say he's an atheist. He's an agnostic. He says like that. But so from that, I said, well, like I said, I read a lot of Asimov's literature back then. But I was like, well, she probably knows what she's saying. But I think in order to keep his readership going, I think he had to probably stay in that position. But that's my theory or my thought on it.
So how old were you when you met her?
I was 24, 25. I'm 57 now, so that was a long time ago.
Page 50, Dawkins gives a 7-point scale of belief versus non-belief. Let's just read through that real quickly. Strong theist, very high probability but short of 100% of belief in God. Higher than 50% but not very high. Exactly 50%, completely impartial agnostic. Lower than 50% but not very low, technically agnostic but leaning towards atheism. Very low probability but short of 0. I cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable. And strong atheist, I know there is no God, with the same conviction as Young knows there is one. And I think it's interesting that it's a spectrum as opposed to sharp delineations between there is, maybe, there is not. And I think Dawkins says he's a 6. He doesn't even go so far as to say that there is absolutely no God. I think that's about where I'm at. I'm at the soft point, which is, I think the evidence is against it. Show me evidence that there is a God, and I'll come around. But you got nothing, so
If
go
I-
ahead, Letty.
You asked the question, and I don't think anyone answered directly. Is it a cop-out?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it is? And I think it is. But I see nothing wrong with it. I think it's a very wise move.
Yeah.
Because it is easier for people to accept people that describe themselves as agnostic socially, and that's a step in the right direction. As far as the 7-point scale and the spectrum, I think everyone has a spectrum in all their beliefs. Catholicism, Judaism, you name it. I think that could be the same level, like a spectrum, but just throw in a little bit about your beliefs in it. Because if you really believe in God, if someone really thinks so, then pretty much anyone can get pregnant at any time, if it's his will. So it always bugged me. I thought, every single mother should be treated like possibly, exactly. You don't know. We don't know. If you really are a believer. It could be anywhere, anybody.
In terms of
So again, they'd be at the far end of the spectrum when it comes to belief, whereas there are other people that are a little more,
right, right.
So,
I mean, in
that's
terms of, I don't think it's just a social phenomenon. I think just in terms of self-belief, it's a way of intellectually hedging your bets.
Yes.
That, I mean, we've had the idea of if you're not theistic, you're going to hell, or you're somehow less than so drummed into us that it's a way of saying, well, okay, I'm going to keep the possibility open just in case. It's like a variation on Pascal's wager. Well, I'm going to act like there's the possibility of the God for the sake of, if there is a God, I want to leave room to go to heaven open for me personally.
I think that model works, but I would offer the following. The reason I'm not a 100% atheist, I'm probably 6.5 if that applies, maybe closer to 6 than 6.5. But it's not based upon what I believe, it's based upon the evidence that I see and that I evaluate. And all I'm asking the theists to do is do the same.
Yes.
And if I'm asking them to do that, I owe it to them and to myself to do that. And so my declaration that there's no God is practically an act of faith. And that's what I think is wrong with theism. It's based on faith. It's not based on data. It's not based on logic. It's not based on analysis. And so I don't see it so much as a cop-out, though I can agree that for a lot of people it may well be. I think it's just trying to be as honest as I'm asking others to be, or I would hope others would be. That my declaration that there's no God is a pretty faithful kind of declaration, and that makes me itchy and twitchy.
So, Rob, do you say you're an agnostic? What do you say when people ask?
I'm an atheist.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah. I'm willing to say that if somebody came up with some evidence, I'd sure listen to it.
Yeah.
So
I'd sure evaluate it.
you're a soft atheist. Your statement is, well, I'm not willing to go so far as to say there absolutely is no God, but I don't believe there's a God because there's no evidence.
Yes, and it's belief that I have the problem with, because belief by its nature doesn't have any evidence.
Right.
Uh,
Not enough
By
evidence.
faith alone, I think is the phrase that,
Well,
that
okay,
I've heard.
maybe not belief, but you draw the conclusion there is no God because there's a lack of evidence.
Yeah, I haven't.
You can go beyond that.
Go ahead.
Lacking evidence, you have to fall back on philosophy. Is it philosophically sound? An examination shows that it's not. For example, there's Pascal's wager, and you know the answer to that. Pascal's wager is, it is better to believe and be wrong than to not believe and be wrong. Well, that doesn't help, because suppose, all right, if Jesus offers me, if I believe in Jesus, I will get everlasting life. But wait, there's Bob. If you believe in Bob, not only will you get everlasting life, but you will get a new car. So the reward for the belief has no bearing over whether the belief is true or not.
Right. Exactly.
And
that's interesting.
and so when you finally look at it, in fact, this is one of the things that we go over and over again in the course that I'm auditing, is that people who have examined it philosophically find there is no basis for needing God. For example, we need God to tell us if something is evil. If we need God to tell us that there's something evil, there's something wrong with us. So that's probably not a good thing to fall back on. If there is something out there evil, but we need God to tell us about it, then why can't we find out independently of God? And what do we need God for if evil is self-evident? So ultimately it boils down to evil is what God says is evil. So now you're not being a moral person. You're just being a person who believes in God, and you're accepting your morality from God.
Which I think is
Bottom line is, philosophically, there's no reason to believe that there is such a supernatural being. I just finished writing an essay that I'm going to propose in the class, but it analyzes this intelligent design concept. And there are three main failures in the philosophy behind the intelligent design. And I got down to the bottom one, and I said, suppose these intelligent design guys are right. Suppose that we cannot explain the universe without some outside power. That doesn't mean the outside power is the God of Abraham.
Right.
They have not accomplished the goal that these intelligent design guys are trying to achieve is to convince us that they need to accept Jesus. If they prove their point, they haven't proved that we need to accept Jesus, because any supernatural being could have created the universe and all the life forms. It did not have to be the God of Abraham. They have no way of tying this into the God of Abraham.
Yeah, well,
Any nonsense will do.
Well, that's along the line of what the deists like Jefferson believed, the clockwork God, that there is a higher power. He set the universe, he or she or it or whatever, set the universe in motion and then kicked back and did nothing. Which I think that's a cop-out.
Yes, it is.
Right there.
Well, I think the whole topic or subject of philosophy was a cop-out by the philosophers so they wouldn't get, burned at the stake or hung or guillotined, so I think
Or unelected, in the case of Jefferson.
Well, philosophy, like I say, they dance around a lot of stuff. I said, why don't they just become a little more direct in there? Why do these poets write poetry when they can just say what they really want to say? Why can't they just say it? Because back then, if you wanted to get something across, you'd have to almost be poetic about it, or in a way where people can't say, "Oh, that contradicts my doctrine or my creed." He just said something very directly. So let me just,
Yeah, and Dawkins is definitely not a poet, which I think is
Yeah.
why he is so easily attacked by
Right.
the religions, the religious.
I have to say, I don't care much what other people think of me, and that's a good thing. Because
Yes.
It helps.
And I admire Dawkins because he seems to be even more impervious than I.
Yeah, you're right.
Dawkins,
He's really tough.
Dawkins has tenure. That helps.
Yes, yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, right.
Well, this is actually a good transition into the next topic ahead, which is there nothing that is and should be the sole province of religion and or philosophy like Dawkins asserts? What about areas for which science may not ever be able to make testable hypotheses, like what set off or happened before the Big Bang, or the reality of string theory, or the explanation behind quantum mechanics? In other words,
Well,
he talks about there's what science has province over, and then there's those who believe that, well, there's a boundary for that beyond which religion or philosophy should hold sway.
Stephen Jay Gould's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Overlapping magisteria.
Yes.
once again, some philosophical thinking, some sound philosophy can answer that. First of all, do we need God to explain the universe? Do we need some external power to explain the universe? There's no reason to suppose so. Physicists have looked at the problem, at the issue. For example, if you might want to read Larry Krauss's book, The Universe Out of Nothing. At one point, there wasn't any universe as we know it. From all we can tell, everything sprang from a single point about 13 billion years ago. But why? Nobody knows why. Now, religion purports to say why. Science doesn't so much get into the why or the motivation. They're more interested in what happened. But in religion's attempt to explain why, they fall back on what I call just making things up, just pulling something out of their ass, so to speak. There's no excuse for saying that a supernatural being created the universe. There is a deeper question that science can't answer, and maybe even philosophers can't answer, is why is there something instead of nothing? Why was there ever a universe to begin with at all? We have all of this matter and everything going on, but there is apparently, from science, you cannot find any reason why all of why the world exists, why something exists. But the attempt by the religious philosophers to explain it, once again, is they're just pulling answers out of the air. They're making this stuff up, and that's not a good approach.
Yeah. Whereas a better approach might be the anthropic principle, which is not so much to say why, but to say, well, we're here because we're here. We're talking about this because conditions were exactly right to bring about conscious life. And we wouldn't be talking about this if it were any other way, and that's as far as you need to go.
The central core of science, for me, the value of it, is that its truth, whatever it decides truth is at any particular time, is always tentative. It's always subject to new information being discovered. It's always subject to a review, a new view of the universe. The very nice little pamphlet almost called The Structure of Scientific Revolution talks about that, Thomas Kuhn's book, about the scientific explanation for something accumulates other data. And as long as that data is supportive, it all works together.
Yeah.
But eventually, eventually the data will clash with the accepted scientific explanation. What do? We don't deny the data.
Right.
We redo the explanation.
Right. Science is not dogma.
So science, if its vision of truth is always tentative, I'd argue that the vision of religious truth is always absolute.
Right.
And that it's not based on anything but some idea that was pulled out of the
And
sky.
it's dogmatic. It's fixed.
I was sharing with Liam earlier how science is just hamstrung by Judeo-Christianity in our culture, especially within our universities that were built upon those ideologies originally. I mean, if it was a Christian university or Jewish university or whatever, I mean, they have an inclination to not rock that religious boat, you know, all the contributors to that. And so they're not, science is giving too much deference to these religious organizations that have founded their institutions, you know. So.
Whereas
Still arguing about evolution.
Right. Well,
Really, I think he makes the point. I don't know. The book that I read before this was The Selfish Gene. It's such a great book. But he says, you know, we had life before Darwin and after Darwin. Well, so Darwin was around 1850 or so, but they didn't have the internet back then, so his ideas didn't get out.
right.
But now, if you read that book, and it's like,
We're so much further past that.
I remember taking a biology class in college, and the professor said he didn't want to, you know, tread on it, you know, gore anybody's oxen. So he said, "This is just, I'm just presenting the theory. Not looking for a religious fight, but here are the facts." And he pointed out some things like, hey, you know, frogs have 5. They all got eyes in front of them, you know. So it's like we're related.
Yeah.
So that was pretty obvious. But then when I read Dawkins, it's like, oh my God, it's so much more deep than that.
Yeah.
But how many people are going to read that? How many people are going to comprehend it? Versus how many people are into religion?
Maybe if more children aren't beaten into submission over religion before they reach age, say, 7, that's going to happen.
Oh, and also, if we could remove political correctness from a lot of these discussions, that would help, because this is the thing. You're afraid to say something because, oh no, that's not politically correct.
Your mind has to be prone for it. Like
You might
Stephen-
offend somebody. No, wait a minute. When people say, "Oh, well, you offended me," you know, there's talk about you being able to sue somebody if they offend you. That is such bullshit. If you're offended, that's your choice.
Right.
If you say I offended you, I didn't do it.
Yeah, right.
For a while in
How can I
Canada,
control your choosing to not be offended or to be offended?
for a while in Canada, until quite recently, you could be charged, found guilty, and fined for saying something offensive about somebody else's religion.
Peterson, you talking about Jordan Peterson?
Yes.
He made that
Yeah.
Yeah,
observation.
New Zealand and Australia too have anti-blasphemy laws. I think Britain does as well.
Isn't it ironic that that's the next step that the Irish are going to take? They're going to teach us something about tolerance.
Right. I know. That's
My ancestors.
Thank Bono for that, huh?
Well, Dawkins, in addition to dogma and indoctrination, Dawkins also talks about the insidiousness of pseudoscientific beliefs such as irreducible complexity. He also takes apart irreducible complexity in a wonderful way. He talks about, well, like the Behe and the like love to talk about the eye, and that it is so complex you take away part of the functionality and it completely goes away. And Dawkins says, that's nonsense. You have the eye of the nematode, which basically detects shapes, and then the eye of the crustacean, which can detect gradients of light, that there are patterns of natural selection and incremental evolution. But in a way, I find pseudoscience like intelligent design or irreducible complexity to be more threatening than the dogma because it's cloaked in the sheep's clothing of science.
Well, I think when I broke away from the religion, I mean, I had to deprogram myself by reading people like Stephen Jay Gould, who's ever since Darwin and Panda's Thumb and Hen's Teeth and Horse's Toes. And he writes, if I look back and try to read his writing today and look back at those books, I go, wow, I don't really understand it. But back then I understood it. And he was trying, him and others, and people like Asimov and Carl Sagan, they tried to advance science, but they had to do it in a way, they had to couch their writing and their language and in a way where it didn't really throw up red flags like, oh, these guys are antichrists or they're anti-Christianity or they're anti-this. They had to do it in that way, but I wasn't able to discern that until like years and years later. And then now you got this new wave of writers like Sam Harris, and you got Dawkins and Kitchens and them, and they're kind of, to me, they're like the second wave of those authors, and they're a little more direct. In another 20 years, you'll probably have people just, hey, listen, that's a blowed up duck argument there. That's a blowed up duck belief. It's just not total nonsense. People will be more likely to just be more direct about their either support or denial of the Abrahamic influences.
My judgments, I loved to listen to Gould. I liked the way he talked.
Yes.
My judgment tells me, and it's subject to criticism, that Gould was wrong about a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But what was nice about it was he was arguing for something not because he believed it,
Right.
but because he thought it was defensible. He
Right.
thought he had data to support it and so forth. And to that extent, wrong science is as valuable as right science because it's all leading us toward greater and greater and greater understanding. That every time a scientific suggestion is blown up, we know more than we did before it was blown up.
Exactly. Well, even if you look at Origin of the Species, if you read it now and you go, man, we're so much further, along in our thinking than even Darwin was. You're not saying you're superior. Actually, your belief system or your understanding becomes greater because you've read him and you've read Wallace's work and everything since Huxley's Defenses and all the way down the line, and people like Gould. But there's still not a lot. There's a lot more to be said about that topic, and a lot of people are still reluctant to discuss it because they saw what happened, to Darwin, and people like him,
During his life, he didn't have such a bad time after he published. There was an acceptance of it.
Yeah.
But with the revivalists and the stuff that goes on in this country and so forth. But I did notice the other day that they announced that nuns are now as numerous, approximately, as Catholics and as fundamental Christians. Nuns meaning people with no
N-O-N-E.
N-O-N-E-S.
I was like,
That it does seem to be headed in a kind of positive direction.
yes. Well,
But the thing about nuns that piques my curiosity is nun doesn't necessarily mean atheist. Nun just means unaffiliated with a organized religion.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to know what percentage of those have moved beyond theism.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure they're headed down this spectrum on page 50.
I hope so.
And that I don't care if some of them aren't all as far along as I am. I'm just interested in their heading that direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be interesting to find that out.
And as you look in, like, for instance, the Yellow Pages church directory, 10 years from now, there's going to probably be double the amount of denominations that are in there. And that's a good thing because when you divide them, you can conquer them, And there is so much at odds with everything and each other that you can't unite them. And that's a good thing for society. You don't want a big united group that has a tendency in a history towards fascism, So the thing is that
I love his anecdote about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which of course is a joke religion to point out the ridiculousness of biblical beliefs, and he says that there has now been a schism within that church, and there is a new Reformed Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Hope they don't go to war with each other.
Right.
A criminal convict in Nebraska announced that he wanted to have his ID picture for the penitentiary taken with his colander on his head. And we have a very smart very responsible, very ethical federal judge who looked at that situation and decided that that man's claims were not religious. That troubled me, because it seems to me that's one thing that ought to be beyond the reach of judges. The judges don't get to decide what is religion and what isn't religion, or what is believed and what isn't believed, or what is the way nature is viewed by someone and the way it's not viewed by someone. That the claims of the flying spaghetti monster are created with all of these other beliefs in mind, and they're a parody with respect to that. But that doesn't mean they can't be believed just as
Fervently.
yeah. Oh well.
Just because it's ironic doesn't mean it's not on an equal footing
Right.
with
There you
other
go.
belief systems.
Just because it's silly. I mean, if you were to say it's not a religion because it's silly, that qualifies almost every religion I've ever heard of.
Sure does.
Right. Why is it no less silly than any other religious?
Because it doesn't have enough
belief
followers
system?
yet.
Back 20 years ago,
That's true.
20 years ago up in Dallas, Mike Sullivan and this other guy,
Gorski.
what?
Gorski?
Yeah, Tim Gorski wanted to establish this North Texas Church of Free Thought, so they applied, I think, Texas Attorney General, whatever you have to do to get yourself declared a religion. And the response they got back was that to be a religion, they had to believe in a higher power. And I think they successfully challenged that.
It might have been the Revenue Department to try to get them status as tax-free.
Well, no, as a religion. Now, they could be tax-free, but
But you are tax-free if you are a religion
That's
in
right.
most of this country. And so they may have been going for that
Oh,
on
well,
purpose.
well, not only that, they wanted to be able to conduct marriages and funerals and stuff like that.
I was just going to
I
ask
like
about
that.
that. What is the legal footing for atheist celebrants in terms of the rights to perform marriages or deliver
Isn't
invocations?
somebody, in fact,
at
thinking about
governmental
that?
meetings?
Yeah, we're doing that. There is a training for atheist celebrants.
In October this year.
Oh,
Yes.
But do
There
they,
we go.
do they have the same legal rights as theist celebrants?
They will.
In most states, yes.
Okay, great. All right.
Back to
let's-
Dawkins.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, back to Dawkins.
everything's
Here's-
Dawkins.
Here's a topic with which I may actually disagree with Dawkins. Do you agree with Dawkins that there is really no such thing as religious extremism, that all religion, including so-called mainstream religion, empowers and enables those who commit atrocities?
With God on our side, all things are permissible.
Got the goons. The
If
Nazi,
you're a true believer.
the German stormtroopers had this on their belt. Got the goons. God is with us.
But is there such a thing as benign or even beneficial religious practitioners? I mean, I believe there is.
I'll give you a
especially-
historic suggestion. Right now, I would argue that most of Islam, based upon what they believe and what they admit believing throughout the world, is about where Christianity of various forms were 400 or 500 years ago. And we've spent the last 400 or 500 years boiling the starch out of Christianity to the point where everybody's a Methodist now. I mean, almost. And
I disagree with
Okay.
you. There's Christian dominionists who are very threatening and
okay, but we don't have the sort of full-scale
Right.
cooking of people in public because they said the wrong thing or they did the wrong thing or they won't confess to the demands.
true. We don't stone people, but I think the
But-
potential is there.
But we still have faith-based honor killings throughout Islam.
Yeah.
And so the question is, for me, how can we deal with that as a society that's going to succeed itself? When we don't have 4 centuries to cook the starch out of Islam.
But that doesn't mean, unlike what Dawkins argues, that doesn't mean that all Islamists enable evil deeds like that. I think there are such a thing as benign and pacifistic Muslims. Yes.
Well, by definition, there's got to be a benign religion, because all it has to be is for me to stand up and say, I declare a benign religion, and here's the name of it, and these are our principles, and everybody go in peace and love. So there must be one, at least.
But I mean, in terms of the big three, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, I mean,
I guess what I'd argue is to the extent that it's not threatening, to the extent that it won't kill people and maim people based upon its beliefs, it's become less and less and less of a religion. That benignity is not part of the nature of pure, absolute, dedicated religious belief.
Consider the Buddhists.
Who are not theistic. Well, some of them are. The Mahayana
They're killing the Muslims and driving them out of the country. So.
In Burma.
In
Yeah,
Myanmar. In Myanmar, yeah. Yeah.
And doing it with relish.
Yeah.
Having a good time.
So does that mean a... Well, I mean,
Well,
certainly,
the
certainly a
so it's not
non-theistic
just the
belief
big
system
three,
is
it's maybe the
corruptible
big
and
four, the big five, or
Yeah.
the big six, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
How about this?
Stalinist regimes did that, and they were atheistic.
That's true.
I'll be quiet.
No, please.
I got nothing good to say. I have nothing useful.
That's all right.
You're such a tease.
Yeah, you want to know.
I'll tell you, it's hard to insult me. It's hard.
Well, coming from a biblical literalist tradition, and I did it. I mean, as you just read, almost exclusively based all your ideology off of the Old Testament and the New Testament, and almost exclusively just focusing on that. What got me actually to doubt it was to be a little bit scientific about it, like the whole Noah's Ark thing. And for that Bible to give me the actual dimensions of the ark, I remember going out on the parade field and walking it off, and then I lived about 2.5 miles away from the Museum of Natural History in D.C. And I went in there and I looked at all the species, and then I went back to the parade field and I said, bullshit. I didn't say it, and we didn't cuss back then, but I was like, so I was like, that's when like doubt was really starting. But the thing was, I really wanted to see the Bible literally perfect, so that way you could act on it and not have any sense of guilt, and just feeling like if you prayed this event was going to happen. You want to, and if it didn't happen, you'd have to say, well, there must be some sin in my life or something like that. Something like that.
You want something that's going to allow you to...
Certainty.
Yeah, and to burn a whole dump truck full of newborn infants.
Yeah.
Without a single second thought.
Right, and that mentality is whatever group whether you're a Christian or Islamic or Jewish. You even see that in Tel Aviv when all the right-wing Orthodox Jewish people are man, they're just standing around and they're just screaming, and it was like, man, I don't want to be with them, be a goyim with them 10 feet of them. They're going to just rip me to shreds, and they're just running through the towns and just, wanting to, and I said, that's the Baptist mentality fulfilled. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call yourself. They're actually acting on the same basis of belief, and acting on Jehovah or monotheism.
But it isn't like Europe was 400 years ago. It wasn't like England was 300 years ago whenever there was a switch in the brand of the king or the queen. Let the burnings begin.
Anyway, you make an interesting point about certainty. That's a big part of human nature. We are pattern-making and pattern-seeking beings, and we don't like uncertainty. And they've done experiments where they've shown people random series of numbers and asked them to analyze them, and they find patterns that aren't there.
Yeah. So,
like you said, certainty is a way of justifying behaviors that would otherwise be considered abhorrent. Like we were talking about at the beginning with the battle of Jericho, or the various biblical genocides and atrocities that are talked about in the Old Testament, and then they asked Israeli school children to give their take on that, and their take was, well, it allowed for the spread of the Jewish people, therefore it's justified and moral. Whereas in any other context, it would be considered abhorrent. You were going to say?
Well, one of the readings in the philosophy course is Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor, which is a chapter of his book, The Brothers Karamazov. And in it, it's the Inquisition in Spain. I mean, this one brother is telling the other about this story that he's concocting about that something that happens during the Inquisition. And Jesus, so there's this guy, there's this Grand Inquisitor in Sevilla, and he just burned a multitude of people at stake and whatever. And this one guy comes before me, and it's Jesus. Jesus has come back. And he says, where have you been? We've been burning people and all this time. And it's because you didn't come back. You were supposed to come back, and so you left us on our own. And so that we've been forced to enforce. It's fallen upon us to provide certainty. I mean, you could have performed some miracles back then. You could have saved yourself, and you could have done all of these things. You could have taken on the 3 temptations and put them down. But you didn't do that. You didn't give us anything to hold on to. Now we've had to do this to ourselves. And look where you've put us. You've put us in this thing. And what we find that people want is they want certainty. They don't want to make these decisions of what's good and evil. And you could have helped us out here.
Recent evolution thought, meaning in the past 40 years or so, some of it has focused on this notion that just like eye color, behavior can be and most certainly is, the argument would go, guided as by evolution. That our behavior, if the behavior of bees evolved, why wouldn't the behavior of human beings have evolved? And if that's so, and I suspect that it is, then I'm guessing that whatever it is that's in our conscious brain that forces us to look for patterns, as you very correctly pointed out, it's the same drive that had early people thinking about explanations that they chose to be religious explanations, magic explanations, etc. I don't see science being any different from that in that regard. That is, it is an attempt to figure out what the hell is going on, what causes what, and it's just that instead of having magic, having supernatural powers taking influence over what goes on in our lives, it's what was it somebody said about the idea of evolution? The idea that the development of species is subject to the same causes and limits as everything else is with respect to physics, chemistry, and biology. That there's something there's some reality in that can offer us an explanation. So far as it hasn't explained everything, but it hasn't yet had to rely on magic or superstition in order to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think science and religion are that far apart in that regard, as a human behavior.
It's a quest for truth.
Watch out. There's this physicist, Roger Penrose, and he was a collaborator with Stephen Hawking. He gave a talk at the University of Texas at Dallas. And
At Dallas?
UT Dallas. That's,
Okay.
where I went to school. I'd finished up, and it was Professor Rindler's 75th birthday, so he came in and gave a talk. And
Wow.
So we attended that. And his statement was that life depended upon a quantum connection between all of the parts of the organism, and he was setting aside that it could all be explained by ordinary chemistry and physics. I mean, especially chemistry. So and he has some other strange ideas, but this is a top-notch guy. This Roger Penrose. He has a number of books. Roger Penrose. He's written The Emperor's New Mind about artificial intelligence. I want to read that if you want to. But he's got some weird ideas. So you don't have to be super religious to have weird ideas.
Oh, I'm with you 100% on that. But at least the non-religious, the scientific analyses are subject to reconsideration. They're subject to criticism, etc. The truth for a scientist is always tentative, but truth for a believer is always absolute. And it's just that I suspect that those two paths towards certainty or relative certainty are triggered by the same part of our brain.
Yeah, I love Dawkins' anecdote about the biology professor who was convinced that the Golgi apparatus did not exist in cells, and then he believes this for 20 years, and then a young lecturer comes in and lays out point by point the proof for the existence of the Golgi apparatus, and the non-believing physician goes crazy, and he says, thank you so much for liberating me of this mistaken belief that I had. I was wrong all along, and you've proven it, and I'm in your debt.
That's the essence of the scientific personality. There's no question about that. That's a beauty.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's switch gears again to one of the later points in the book. Dawkins points out the irony that the atheist who believes that there is nothing beyond this life is generally comfortable with assisted suicide and palliative care, while the theist who believes in an eternal afterlife is generally obsessed with quantity of life at the cost of quality of life. What is the explanation or explanations for this?
Well, I can tell you what the religious point of view is. They want you to live longer because they figure that you need to get right with God. You got to confess your sins. You got to get, you got to get saved or whatever. So the thing is, you don't want to take them out early, and they never getting to that point of confession, or So it's real easy there, and you don't. To me, it's like cut and dry. That's why the society in general, our society, is against it. It's from a religious perspective.
Well, I have a question about that, Sean, because if you go to confession and you confess everything, then you're all right and you're clean, so you should be able to just.
Okay.
I mean, I would take on my sin, take on the sin, and get rid of you. In other words, I mean, if I really loved you, I would. That's what I'm saying. So I don't agree with that 100%. Is what I'm saying, because it's got to be something else.
But you could see that's motivation. I mean, that may be an explanation. I'm more cynical. I think the explanation is that the basic motivation for religion is our fear of death.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
That we want to believe really hard that there's something beyond all of this.
Well, they want you to experience that pain, so you fear death and you fear the eternal punishment if you don't.
No,
get your thinking.
I'm talking about this idea, and I'll admit it's cynical. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Yeah, right.
At least among the believers.
Right.
And I look back and try to make sense of religion in those terms, and I think it makes sense. Yeah. I'll believe any of this crap if they'll give me some reason to think that I'm not going to vaporize in my existence the moment I'm pronounced dead.
Well, it's like even with the Christians, the whole rapture concept. Oh, you don't have to die. Jesus might come back, and you might be taken. You might be raptured away.
I ain't
might
going.
not.
I'm sorry.
The rapture.
I'm not going.
Oh yeah, right.
I think the fear of death can be taught. I'm just saying, or learned. I think that's what they teach their children, to fear death.
There are even noted atheists who believe that religion was necessary to keep people in line. L. Sprague de Camp was a science fiction writer. He was a collaborator with Asimov and with Robert Heinlein, and he wrote science fiction in Conan the Barbarian. And he was a noted non-believer, but he told us that that it is useful. The people fearing God would behave themselves. It helped to control people, to keep them from acting out, from doing the wrong things. Even though he didn't believe in any of it, he thought it was useful for society.
But there's also the carrot of the promise of eternal reward after death.
Right.
Well, why not speed the process of death? If somebody's
Everybody
dying,
wants to go to heaven.
yeah.
Nobody
Why
wants to
not?
die.
It's like that story in the book about somebody goes to the abbot and says, "I'm dying," and the abbot says, "Oh, congratulations! You're so lucky. You're on your way to your eternal reward."
That's how Mother Teresa felt. I mean, she wasn't there to save them. She was there to give them a place to die, and people criticized her for that. She could have saved lives. That was not her mission. Her mission, because they were going to go to heaven, her mission was just to give them a place to die, not out in the streets. That's all.
That's the only true believer I've ever heard of. I mean, true.
All right. Well, I have one last topic, related topic. Why do you feel, as Dawkins urges, it is better to embrace the scary prospect of mortality than to take comfort in the hope of an afterlife, even if that hope is probably false?
Wait, say that again.
Hang on. Why do you feel, as Dawkins urges, it is better to embrace the scary prospect of mortality than to take comfort in the hope of an afterlife, even if that hope is probably false. Why do we not need to live in denial of death? In other words, why is it important to not live in denial of death, but to embrace death as a prospect instead of fooling ourselves that there's
You boil
something
that down.
beyond?
We're eliminating all the negatives. Why don't we embrace death? Is that it? Is that what we're talking about?
Instead of fooling ourselves
looking-
that there's
looking
life
forward
after
to it.
death.
Oh, and the obvious answer is you shouldn't fear death. Who's had general anesthesia here?
Yeah, it's
The world goes away.
Yeah.
It's like that in death. They're only. I've tried to explain it one time. Suppose there were important football game, very important, and you went to the game and it was very critical, and the game was in progress and the score was in doubt, and something happened and you had to leave the game and you never found out how the game came out. Death is not like that. When you leave the game, there is no game. There's nothing. The game never finishes. That's the way death is, and that's the way you should look at it. The only ones affected by your death are the people around you. Nobody else is affected.
But I'm sorry, go ahead, Lydia.
Well, I could say, I know I'm not fearful of death, and I'm raising my children, and people criticize me for that. It happens to everyone at home. It happens to everybody. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to everybody. And I raise my children with that. To value what you have now, and when they're gone, there should be no regret. Because you had that opportunity now. What kills me is people fly down for the funeral. I mean, they show up for the funeral. I'm thinking, where were you when they were still around?
Right.
My grandma died. I've got to get back home. I'm thinking, I mean, she was old, right? You kind of knew she wasn't going to live past 99, and I'm thinking you could have visited her, but now they got to go. That doesn't make sense.
We've learned that fear through religion.
I agree.
Because
I
I
think
mean, a
that's what it is.
2-year-old.
I think you teach
I mean, they turn their head. Like I said, we were talking earlier. I mean, if you killed an infant, they don't know what's coming. They don't, I mean, you point a gun at them, they're not, boom, their life is over. Because what I'm saying is the thing is you have to actually live long enough. Or fear of swimming, for instance. Little kids when they're under 2, they don't have that fear. They haven't learned it from their brothers and sisters. The fear of swimming, they'll take to swimming right away. If they're under a certain age, and they'll just swim. And the thing is that once they're about 3 or 4 years old and they've been taught this or that, that fear gets there, and now you've got a hurdle for them to get past. I mean,
Let me give you.
Go ahead.
Let me give you a couple of arguments why I think that I agree with Dawkins' point. One is, what part of reality wouldn't you deny? If I guess I'm making an argument for the truth or the truth about reality. If you're going to deny the part of reality about death, what would be out of bounds? What could you not? What would you think it would be improper or unethical to deny about reality? It seems to me death is just. We should no more concern ourselves about somebody who's no longer alive than we should about somebody who hasn't been born yet.
Yeah, and he talks about how Mark Twain says the prospect of death doesn't bother me because the universe happened before I was alive, and the universe will continue to happen after I am dead.
Okay. The other argument I'd make is that when you talk about, when it is suggested that the belief in an afterlife is somehow, it relieves some of the pain of existence, so does heroin. And if all we want is to take away the hard part of reality, just OD me on heroin. Because for the time that I'm paying attention until I stop breathing, I'm happy as a clam. and that'd be my argument.
The opiate of the masses.
Yeah.
well, science for me, for the pursuit of science, assuages that fear that's been indoctrinated into me from religion. So the thing is, actually, the more I learn scientifically, and most of the time something scientific imposes those dogmas and doctrines I was indoctrinated with, the better I feel about that imminent event that's going to come.
We hope not imminent, maybe eventual,
Right.
but not imminent.
I think the way I'm taking this point is he's basically saying, hey, look, the afterlife or a religious belief versus the death thing. It's like, yeah, right, you got to accept reality. We're going to die. You're just going to avoid trying to accept that. Okay, that's A. But the other thing about the afterlife, it's just the whole religious thing, you know. Another reason for why he want to take that position is why waste your time thinking about all this other bullshit that isn't true, right? So you're going to spend your time spinning your wheels on religion, worrying about it, praying, going to church, yada yada, guilt trip, all this stuff. That's just like, well, I could actually be using these cycles to learn
Something.
that song you mentioned.
Right.
Everybody wants to go to heaven and nobody wants to die, right? But I'm going to give you an instance when I think it's handy to have this bullshit belief. I have a friend, he's religious. In fact, he calls me when he says, I'm going to present something. What kind of bullshit are they going to hit me with? It's another story. But he's got a daughter that's in prison right now in Virginia. And she has been framed. She is not guilty, but she's in the system. And it breaks my heart whenever he tells me. I don't even want to hear from him again because it's just like, I have a daughter too. Kind of imagine how I would feel with my daughter in prison. Well, so she's in prison and she's, converting other people because they're deeply religious. And, oh, well, this is just God's way of doing something. And God's working through me to help these other prisoners. I'm going like, I don't want to shoot that down because that's all that's holding her together. So, like, what if I was in prison or my daughter was in prison and she didn't believe that shit? I don't know.
Well, but if there was a just and moral God, she wouldn't be in prison for being.
I know, but that doesn't help the facts.
I totally
Of course, that's
wholeheartedly
correct.
disagree with that because then you realize and accept it happens all over the world, everywhere.
Yes, it does.
And that makes you, I think, if you
It- so-
realize.
So
he
that
has
religion
no
gives you
power
something
over
to hold
that.
on to when things are bleak. It is the opiate of the masses.
If you ever want to feel bad, think about the fact that
That's fine.
someplace in the world, every 3 seconds, a toddler dies.
That's
Every 3
That's
seconds.
what Sam Harris brought up in one of his books. He says,
Who?
Sam Harris.
Yeah,
Nine-
I didn't
he
know
says
it.
he says 9 million people under the age of 18 die annually in the world. 9 million people. So it's like, okay.
I think it's 3 million toddlers.
yeah,
One
right.
every 3 seconds.
And that's God's will,
Yeah.
which is
Well, as a matter of fact, it isn't free will. That is, it isn't other human beings do it.
God's will,
It's
quote, unquote.
well, it's diarrhea, it's infections, it's
Right.
Dysentery.
parasites, it's all kinds of stuff that human beings never had a choice about at all.
Right.
But also, we don't let people just die already. I mean,
Not
we
in
don't
our
let them
culture.
just die. I mean, they keep them alive as long as humanly, or as long as
Humans do.
can.
Yeah.
Right.
But
so-
God doesn't.
True, and that's why I feel that you're being a bit of a hypocrite if you think it's God's will, and then here you are, your mom's all hooked up, and you will not let her go. A friend of mine, she went through that, and she and I talked about it. I said, let her go, and even the doctor, he said, you don't understand. He says, I'm a doctor, and I make very good money. He says, I wouldn't be able to afford to keep my mother going like this. And yeah, my friend lost everything. She had her mother hanging on, and it was humiliating. It was horrible what her mother went through for another 3-4 years. And I was thinking, time like that, I think her mother I don't think was afraid of death, but Jeanette wasn't ready to let her go. And that's another thing, same thing with, I guess, spouses or whatever, our parents, we don't just let them go.
Liam,
Is it
I
time?
need to go away.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for putting up with me. It's
Oh, it was fun.
No,
Thanks,
it's
Rob.
wonderful. Thank
living
you so
with me
much
is
for
no
your
day on the beach. Thanks, guys.
And the irony of the fundamentalist insistence that we make all these, they call them heroic interventions, all these medical interventions, is that's human agency, whereas letting somebody go naturally should be perceived by the fundamentalists as more of God's agency. And that's that same irony, is that the atheist is comfortable with the natural process, whereas the fundamentalist wants to make all these human invented interventions. It's bizarre. It's the opposite of the way it should be.
Well, can I ask, is everyone's parents still around?
Yes.
Yes.
And are you prepared?
No.
I should probably ask them what they want or how they want it, but
Oh, I know what they want.
yeah.
Yeah. I've had that conversation with them, and I need to make a living will. It's important to specify that I sure as hell do not want to be kept alive on a breathing machine and and all that. And the reason I know that is I've presided over the death of 2 cats and a dog, and I've seen the gentle, humane death that ketamine or whatever causes, and I'm like, well, that's the way I want to go.
Steve, are your parents still around?
Yeah, they're young. They're 67 or something. I don't get along with them well enough to discuss their will or something.
Yeah. Well, it seems like I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A month ago, my grandmother tried to die with dignity. She tried to give up her pills and eating, and the whole family flew up here and talked her out of it. And then yesterday, she was diagnosed with C. diff, which is a horrible way to go. I think there's a lot of pain involved, and I think like 1 out of 10 people over the age of 60 that are diagnosed with it pass away within a month of the diagnosis. And then she's 90. She's almost 91 now. So I don't think she's going to make it. She's been in bad shape for a long time.
Well, I think we're at a good stopping point. Just real quick, are there any topics in the book that we didn't cover that we should discuss before we go? Okay. So before you go, if you have any suggestions for the next book, I'd love to make a note of them, because I definitely want to do this on a regular basis. And thank you all for coming. This was a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And those 13 other people who signed up and didn't show up really
God
missed
will get
out.
Yeah.
God will get him.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Does anybody have any suggestions for what to do next?
So do you want to keep this always about atheism, or is it other parts of science?
We could also do secular humanism, anything related to Fact's mission.
Oh, okay.
About intelligent design,
Oh, yeah.
creationism and intelligent design.
Where
We could do that.
Where you see science actually being
Perverted.
Yes, right.
Pseudoscience.
Yeah, abuse of science.
Or abuse or neglect. That's more.
Do you have a good book on that topic?
Yeah, there's several around. We can review some of the creationist books. I have the creationist books. I buy their books. Okay.
Okay. You have my email, right?
Yep, I've got
Can
your
you email me a couple
He's got
suggestions?
the letter. He's even Ben Stein. I mean, what the heck?
Jarvis, where did you meet you?
I met you at